Hi, I'm Nikki, the obsessive bookseller. Welcome to this episode of Read Reading TBR for June 2024. I have a lot of completed books this month. A lot of them I had been carrying along for months and months and then finally wrapped up in June, but we're counting it. For the last 8 months or so, I've been trying to get real with myself on how many books I can actually read in a given time frame. Because I've been delusional. I'm like, oh yeah, I can fit in 10 books when realistically 7 is my max. Especially when I'm reading massive tomes like I did this month. Finally getting realistic on the expectations that I put on myself has made my reading a lot more fun, and it's allowed me to plan out all of the obligations I've signed myself up for without as much stress as I used to have. Now I'm taking it one step further. I'm trying to focus on completing series. I have way too many outstanding. I'm going to do a video on that coming up soon. In any case, a lot of the books that I read this month completed series, so that's amazing. First up, for Patreon Book Club, I read City of Last Chances by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is book 1 in the Tyrant Philosophers series. It's a standalone, essentially, but I guess there's a companion novel, and then there's another one coming out in December. You can see it's still got the bookmark in it. I'm like 2 chapters from the end, so I'm considering it read. I'm considering it completed for the sake of this video. But this was an interesting book. I feel kind of a little bit back and forth on it. This is not one that I think I could recommend very easily. Because a lot of the comments I read on Goodreads, like people DNFing left and right, and I can get why. Because there are passages that are super, super interesting that like totally engage you, and then there's a slog between them. Then I wait until I hear a character that sounds familiar, and then suddenly I'm back in and interested again. I did this one on audio, and I think I had a hard time with the narrator. There were passages that read physically didn't faze me at all, like I totally understood everything, but the audio component for some reason was a little bit challenging. But it was a very creative work. One of the coolest structural thing that I've read from Adrian Tchaikovsky. He's usually pretty straightforward, with the exception of Children of Memory. But I like what he did here as like a woven domino effect type of storytelling where the next POV is dependent on something that happened in the first POV, and it kind of builds off of each other and culminates into this really cool event. And like seeing what's going on, kind of a bird's eye view from all of these different perspectives in the city is so cool. And I am actually glad there are companion novels, because this world, we're only exploring one tiny little bit of it, but he's opened up for so many other things that we can look at. It's one of the things I love about Tchaikovsky, like his throwaway world building could be entire books within themselves, and that's how I feel about this. So hopefully some of the things that were mentioned in here and some of the cool places and peoples will get explored in those next books. But yeah, very excited. But if you've read the next one, don't tell me what it covers. I kind of want to be surprised going in. Overall rating, like very well written, not one of my favorite Tchaikovskys. I think personally I liked it a 4 out of 5 star level, but from a recommendability standpoint, I'm thinking like a 3 star, you know? So 4 for me. I expect the average to give it 3. I finally finished Brissinger. This book was way too long. And even in the author's interview at the very end of the audiobook, he was like, oh yeah, like this wasn't even supposed to happen. And then I had an additional 100 pages justifying that decision that I changed or whatever. And the editor was just, oh, all in delight and glee and like, oh, I just love that there was more. But see, in my opinion, I don't think that needed to have more. I think he would have benefited from a little bit of a harder editor who wasn't just basking in everything that he was doing. Because that first like 200 pages felt like a slog. It felt like we were just traveling from one place to the other. Nothing really meaningful ever happened. And that's why, because it wasn't really supposed to be there. It was just justifying a decision change. There could have been like tighter ways to do that. So I was like halfway through the book and like, really nothing's happened yet, but I am enjoying the flow of the writing. I'll give that to him. The writing, I felt the same way about To Sleep in a Sea of Stars. There was like an entire tangent that was 100 pages that I thought didn't need to be there. But the flow of the writing made it bearable, and by the end of the book, I'm like, yeah, you know, I was thinking I probably wouldn't continue for a while, just because I needed a break from it, but I actually am curious to see where the story ends up. Now, the fact that Murtagh has come out is a bit annoying, because that means that there's more to read, whereas before I only had 2 books to complete to finish the series, this being one of them. Now there are more. Do I want to continue? I don't know. For the sake of, I'm giving this 3 out of 5 stars. Not very memorable and pacing problems, but it's nostalgic. A buddy read with my patrons Alyssa and Dave, Head On by John Scalzi. This is the second book in the Lock-In series. There might be more. These are like really nice little snack standalone mystery sci-fis that I loved. Like this one must have been in the perfect mood for it because it tickled me pink. I thought it was so good. There's a lot of things that were probably a little too convenient, I'll give it that, but I enjoyed the heck out of it. I'm kind of a mystery snob, so this one included a mystery that was well done enough that I didn't spend the entire time criticizing the fact that I could see everything coming. Like I knew what the solution was. No, he weaves a tight enough tale and he doesn't rely on those classic mystery plot building tropes that, yeah, it was satisfying. I loved it. I'm thinking like a 4 out of 5 star. I don't know. John Scalzi, he's better than just like random fluff sci-fi that you come across because his stuff does have a little bit of substance. So that's why some friends and I on Fantasy Buddy Reads, when we read Old Man's War, we labeled it Fluff Plus. Like it's a fluffy, fun, light read, but it's just got just enough little substance in there to keep coming back. And that's how I feel about this work as well. So, loved it. Maybe 4.5 if I'm feeling generous. My patrons Sonia and Alyssa and I read Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. This is book 2 in the Fourth Wing series. I enjoyed the snot out of this book. I felt like it was a lot more balanced than the first book. The first book, there was a really strong fixation on the boy, and that kind of went away a little bit in this one in favor of other things going on. Now, there are still a couple of, like, what the heck moments going on, like plans that don't make any sense to me. This author lost my faith in her ability to tell a tight world-building story early on because a lot of the things about her series doesn't make sense to me. But there were less of them in this book, and the pacing was so good. It was just like very page-turning, to the point where the problems are still there, but I'm swinging more towards just like overlooking them and enjoying the book for what it is. She's making me care less and less about the semantics of it all and more about just the fun of the story. The first one had more novelty in it, like you're meeting dragons for the first time and finding out the setting for the first time, getting to know the characters for the first time, the love story tension angle, whatever. And so none of that is present in here because we're just kind of expanding on everything that came before, but still wildly enjoyable. She managed to keep the school setting prominent, which is something that I wasn't sure was going to continue on into the next book. But apparently she likes school settings as much as I do because she found a way to incorporate learning sequences and stuff. So yeah, I liked it. 4 out of 5 stars. I finally finished Time of Courage by John Gwynne, just in time for the Broken Binding editions to come out. I didn't love this one. I didn't love it. I wish I did. It's still good. It's like a 3-star read, but it's not anything that I felt particularly moved by. I never felt connected with any of the characters, whereas The Faithful and the Fallen, there were like 4 or 5 people that we were following that I felt so attached to the point where their journey resolutions are still with me, and I think about that. I'm like, oh, that character. That was such a good character. I didn't find anybody in here that I connected with. I also thought the villain, the conflict, everything surrounding that didn't take quite an interesting direction as I thought it would. It was kind of just like, meh. Of all the things in the first series that could have been expanded on, this is the aspect that I was probably least interested in. I don't know, but I'm definitely in the minority. I read this entire series with my patron Katie, and she loved it. Just as much as the first series. And then comments that I've gotten, people who have read the series and love it, like, oh my gosh, you're in for such a treat. And I'm like, eh. But that's okay. 3 out of 5 stars for me, but one of those that I think recommendably most people will give about a 4. And yes, I am buying the Broken Binding editions, even though I didn't love it, because I just can't help myself. Veiled Throne by Ken Liu, book 3 in the Dandelion Dynasty series. Read this with my patrons Dave and Alyssa. And man, this third book, so Wall of Storms was the ultimate. My gosh, it's heavy. It was so good. It was filled with a mix of everything, like deep character immersion, tons of building momentum, pacing for days, so many novel things, so many interesting things. Whereas in Veiled Throne, you take a step back a little bit and you casually move through and you go with characters you weren't expecting to go with. And you know, because you trust the author, because he did so well in the first 2 books, that he's doing something with it. He's building. And actually, you read the back of the book and it said, oh, this is meant to be in combination with the 4th book. They were meant to be one long story arc. So you get to the end of this one and nothing is resolved because you're supposed to read the next one immediately. That's exactly how it felt. It felt like a prolonged beginning to the final arc of this series. And as long as it goes somewhere meaningful, I'm all there for it. There were so many passages where I'm like, why are we here? It's really good. It's so interesting. But some of the things he chose to focus on, but see, that's the thing. I love his writing so much that some of the weird things that were in this book, I just delighted in, even though it felt like it had no bearing on the outcome of the series as a whole, but you know, because it's Ken Liu, that it will. Yeah. So pacing on this one, very odd, but story component, very interesting. He finds a way to keep you connected to all these characters, and we'll see how the next one goes. I imagine, I mean, he's already dazzled me for a few things that he's done in this series in the first 2 books, so the fourth one's going to be fine. I'm not worried about it at all. I think it's going to be great. But the story was odd. Still a 4.5 out of 5 star read, though. I snagged an audio copy from NetGalley of Fireborn Blade by Charlotte Bond. This is a new novella coming out soon. And I gotta say, I didn't love it. This was one of those where I appreciate how it was written. It was like a literary fiction writer tackling the subject of dragons. And she had a lot of very interesting story ideas, things about dragons and lore and some of their biological mechanisms that I've never quite read before. Like the magic surrounding them, how they affect the people. But something about it just... So it was kind of a woven story tale. And so you start with the present and then you weave back to something that happened before, and she kind of weaves that in until they kind of make sense that everything was told alongside. But it takes so long to get to that culmination that you kind of feel like you're listening to a textbook a little bit. Though on one hand, I appreciate the story for what it is, and I think it's kind of a work of art. But on the other hand, from a consumer standpoint, I wish it had clipped along a little bit more quickly, and I wish it had felt a little less anecdotal and tangent-y as it went. Now, bouncing straight off of that, I immediately read The Bloodless Princes, and it's like everything in the first book, but like double down. So you get these anecdotal things that are part of the style of the series now. And you know, I appreciated it a little more reading it in the second book because it made me see like the whole picture on what she's trying to do with the story structure. So retroactively gave the first book a little more credits because like, okay, I see the vision now. That being said, the plot that we followed in this second book, I was not behind it all. Man, it kind of took like a real world gritty dragon thing and kind of made it existential. Maybe fanciful is the better word. It took it out of this like really core dark reality and made it kind of unrealistic, unplausible. And it's her world. She can do whatever she wants. But I don't know. I was looking for that like grounded in a society that's actually kind of feasible and kind of parallel to what's possible in our world, plus dragons. But it went way beyond that. So the first book, maybe a 2.5 out of 5 stars, and it's usually like it was better than just okay, but I'm not sure if I liked it. The second book was 2 stars. Like, it was just okay. So new series, not the best impression for me. I don't know if I will be continuing on if there are more books in it, but I can appreciate it for what it is, yeah? And then finally, I read Slow Productivity by Cal Newport. This is his newest book, and I love him for his digital minimalism. Reading that book is kind of what launched me on becoming aware of how I'm spending my time in relation to my phone. And it launched a whole bunch of changes that I'm still reaping the benefits from. I've read that book several times. Slow Productivity was so good. It was in line with what I'm already trying to do for myself, trying to handle all the things, but do them with grace, focus on fewer things at once, which is applicable to my reading life as well. And he had some very good principles. I don't know what it is about his book. I finished reading it a little over a month ago, and I'm kind of itching to reread it again and kind of enmesh. He's one of those writers where the inspiration comes from the process of listening. And maybe I need to take better notes because like some of his really good lessons hit me better on the re-listen. But it was quality. A lot of people know him for his Deep Work book. I didn't love that one. I thought it was more theorizing, but I didn't feel like it had enough practical applications. This one, awesome. I think I can consider Cal Newport a favorite productivity/lifestyle guru. I think he's great. Highly recommend that one, especially if you feel like you're working so hard and getting very little done. It gives you good perspective on how to elevate the things that are most important and really give them the attention they deserve, right? And kind of how to alter and kind of shift and build your whole life around supporting that type of work mindset. 4 out of 5 stars right now, probably will go up on the reread. Hey, let's talk about currently reading. I am dang near finished with this book, Broken God by Gareth Hanrahan, book 3 in the Black Iron Legacy series. My patron Sonia and I are reading this one together, and it's taken a long time. It's like a 600-page book, and it's a physical read only. And I am so glad someone mentioned in the comments that this is not actually the end of the series. It's not a trilogy. It's supposed to be a 5-book series. Hopefully more will get written, because as I'm reading this one, I'm like, there's no way it's going to wrap it up in any satisfying way. There's going to be more hanging out. In fact, there is a good chunk of this book that takes place, like, the pacing is atrocious. Like, nothing happens, and it kind of takes place all in the same section of this world with, you know, a healthy bouncing back and forth of POVs, but very little actually moving forward in each POV. But the thing that makes it work is that it's all very highly interesting stuff. So even though we're lingering on some good things, and overall, I'm not going to hold it against the book very much. But I know he's working on the Sword Defiant series, the second book of which just came out. I'm hoping he'll wrap that one up soon and come back to this, because I want to know what happens with all these characters. I am highly invested. I find that this series incredibly memorable, incredibly unique. I love all the ideas in here. I love that we haven't even touched on certain things yet, and I can only imagine what the next book is going to bring. I am close enough to the end of the book that I think I'm confident giving it like a 4-star plus. Even though it's not complete, I highly endorse it. Like, The Gutter Prayer is the very first book and one of the most unique, cool things I've ever read. And the series has continued to deliver in that same vein consistently throughout. The second book was wild. It was a bit hard to follow, like so many things going on. Like, even the author said there were probably a few too many politic ideas in there, but whatever. But things definitely slowed back down in this book and made it easy to follow and fun. All right, let's talk about my TBR for the next month or so. Now, I only have 3 books here because I need to read like a book for Readburn Horde that I haven't picked yet. I need to read 2 or 3 books for the next Patreon challenge that we've selected, which is a really fun one, but it makes planning reading so difficult because I draw them randomly, right? And then I've decided to read a couple that I don't actually own. In any case, I am itching to get back to some Emily Henry because it's summer, and it seems like the perfect time to dive into these amazingly fun romances. So, people we meet on vacation, it's not necessarily a series, but they're all kind of in the same vein. And from what little I've heard, Beach Read and Book Lovers are 2 of her best, and then things like not quite as good in these ones, but that's okay. I have been pushing this book back and back because I'm like, oh, I should read things that are a little more like high priority on my fantasy read list, but I'm just in the mood for a good romance. I think it'll break it up, especially since I just got done reading a whole bunch of tomes. Yeah, this is the palate cleanser I need. I would also like to continue my adventures with the Shadows of the App series by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is book number 6? 7! Woohoo! Heirs to the Blade. Book 6, The Sea Watch, totally reinvigorated my love for the series. I love the creature creation in here. I just think it is so creative. The plots are getting tighter, like it feels like we're headed somewhere. Like, it was kind of tangential. Like, a few of them have been kind of tangential, but I don't know. I am so invested that I cannot wait to see what happens next. And it seems like every single book after book 4 is focused on a specific type of bug and kind of digging into their lore. And this one might be a spider book. I'm hoping this is going to be so good. And then yes, I am still trying to fit into my schedule Foul Days by Genoveva Demova. Book 1 in the Witch's Compendium of Monsters. It's a duology. This one comes out end of June. The next one, Monstrous Nights, comes out in October. I keep mentioning this, but you know, this is also a physical read, and Broken Gods has taken me so long that basically ate into any time I had to read this one. But as soon as I finish that one, this is the one I will be picking up physically. It's at the point now where, with how many times I've mentioned it on this channel, it better be good. This better be a standout read if I'm going to drag it along for so many months. But yeah, very excited for that. Thank you to Tor for sending it to me. And then begrudgingly, I am reading Of Darkness and Light by Ryan Cahill. Book 2 in the Bound and the Broken series. I was okay with the first book. Like, there were some fun elements to it, but I thought the author focused on all the wrong things. Like, would highlight this random character just for the sake of building this, like, small town culture or whatever, but nothing that was highlighted had any bearing on the plot. Like, the author did not do a very good job in my opinion, of focusing the reader on the most important things. It felt kind of meandering. And so I don't know. It was a rough first go, but it wasn't bad. Like, it had a really nice flow to the writing, and that is honestly why I read almost the entire book. I didn't read the last like couple chapters. I was pretty fed up by then. But I hear it gets better. This is one of those series where a lot of people acknowledge that the first book was just okay, but then he really finds his writing stride as the series continues. And so, begrudgingly, because I'm going to need to go back and read like the last couple chapters of the first book because I just got so fed up I put it down. But I will continue, and I will use this second book as the ultimate judge on whether or not the series works for me. If it gets better, it's honestly a very inspiring thing because, like, when you're starting out as a writer, not everything has to be perfect. So from an enjoyment standpoint, yeah, I can point out a lot of critical things, but I actually really appreciate that the author put the work out into the world and then continued to grow from there, supposedly. Hopefully the story grows in a direction that I actually like, but we'll see. But I'm very nervous about this one. I'll be buddy reading it with my patrons Dave and Alyssa, and I know both of them enjoyed the first book more than I did, so I will take my cranky pants off so I don't wreck their experience also. But hopefully it's good. And then other than that, I have a few books to read for my challenges, my quarterly challenges with my patrons, and those are random draw, so I know kind of vaguely what types of books I'm going to be reading, but I don't know the specifics ones yet. And then I have picked a book for Read Burn Hoard, but yeah, hasn't aired on the channel yet, so I don't want to give away the surprise. So that's a lot of books that I read, and actually as I was filming, I meant to be kind of like ranking them as I went. I'm going to do that right now just because I find it incredibly interesting. I did it on the recent Overhauled Challenge wrap-up, and I really like the perspective, but I don't really like doing the tier ranking things where you get like the black screen with like the colored labels on the side and you just kind of move the things over. No, like I got the physical books right here. I want to see. So, City of Last Chances, like I said, I think I enjoyed it more than the average person would. It's going to be somewhere right in the middle. Brissinger, like, I could take it or leave it. My nostalgic self is happy that I read it, but it really wasn't anything to write home about. Head On! Freaking love this book. So far, that's the top one. Iron Flame. Okay, so City of Last Chances was kind of a challenging read, and I found it a little bit more difficult to recommend. It had more substance, like it's really more my style, because I like books that kind of have, I don't know, that make more sense. They're about the same. It's kind of funny. One has what the other doesn't. And so I'm taking the fact that City of Last Chances took me like 3 or 4 days longer than it should have to finish, whereas Iron Flame, I read a lot quicker. I read a lot more quickly because I was more invested, so even though they're both 4 stars, that one's kind of edging it out. No blasphemy. Time of Courage, an easy one. I liked it more than Brissinger, but not as much as the Tchaikovsky. And then Veiled Throne, even though it was a weird book, like, yep, I think that's where that's going. And then, okay, from a quality standpoint, this is so much better than the John Scalzi book, but from pure enjoyment and how much, like, I loved it, John Scalzi's getting the win. So, there you have it. That's my month ranked and rated. So thanks so much for joining me on this one. I had a really good month in reading. I'm going to throw it out there that I do book reviews on Goodreads very inconsistently, but I'm trying to incorporate that more into my schedule. I started out as a book reviewer on there and then transitioned over to YouTube and kind of lost a lot of the time I had to work on that kind of stuff. So book reviews were the core of my content creation before I moved to BookTube, and I'm trying to figure out a way to build it back into my schedule. So if you're interested in more in-depth, thorough reviews of any of these books, plus the other books you might like tagged onto each one of them, friend me on Goodreads. My profile link is in the description, hoping by declaring that on this video that it'll hold me accountable to actually writing the reviews for all of these. Like, I'm a bit behind. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye.